Welcome to the Explainer. Seriously, we've got some massive, just completely shocking news straight out of New York today. I mean, I really don't think anyone had this on their 2026 offseason bingo card, but it's totally official, guys. Odell Beckham Jr. is actually returning to the New York Giants. The prodigal son is coming back to East Rutherford. Can you believe it?
It's pretty wild to see, for sure. But, before we all get completely swept away in the sheer emotion and all that pure nostalgia of seeing number 13 back in giant blue, we kind of need to take a really hard look at reality. Because, let's be real, an NFL front office simply doesn't make a giant, headline-grabbing move like this in the middle of June unless there's a serious underlying sense of panic going on behind closed doors.
Okay, I know you're always the pragmatic realist here, but come on. This is Odell Beckham Jr. we're talking about. The guy literally defined an entire generation of Giants football. Even if this is, version 2.0, like head coach John Harbaugh called it. There's just a tremendous amount of optimism right now. People are hoping his veteran presence can be the exact spark this young roster desperately needs to finally get back to the postseason.
Look, a spark is great, absolutely. But let's be totally honest about what's really driving this June reunion. It's an emergency lever. The Giants' wide receiver room has completely deteriorated over the last few weeks. It's falling apart. So this isn't just some feel-good homecoming parade. It's a desperate Band-Aid for a struggling franchise that's just scrambling to give sophomore quarterback Jackson Dart some viable targets before training camp even opens up.
Well, in this explainer, we've got a really clear journey laid out for you. We're going to cover a desperate wide receiver room, then the prodigal son returns. We'll look at nostalgic hype versus reality, weigh the risk and the reward, and finally break down expectations for version 2.0.
And you can bet we are going to debate every single angle of this whole shebang. While you might literally be putting on your vintage 2014 jersey right now, I'm over here looking at the medical charts and the stat sheets. Let's get right into it.
Host 1. Part 1, a desperate wide receiver room, why the Giants are panicking in June. Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate. An NFL team simply doesn't pull the cord on signing an aging veteran receiver who sat out an entire year, unless things are going disastrously wrong. The month of June is usually for fine-tuning things, right? Not frantically searching the veteran market for emergency bodies. The Giants are panicking, and honestly, looking at their roster right now, they absolutely should be. Let's look at this mounting casualty list, because this is the real catalyst here. Before training camp has even officially begun, the Giants' receiving core has been decimated. You've got veteran playmaker Gunnar Olszewski tearing his Achilles during an OTA practice on a Friday, just a devastating season-ending blow. Then you've got their star young receiver Malik Neighbors, who had a really complicated ACL recovery and recently required a second surgery just to remove scar tissue in his knee.
Yeah, it's a totally bleak stage. I'll definitely concede that point. You just don't host a sudden Monday morning workout featuring Odell Beckham unless you have a gaping hole to fill immediately. And let's not forget Darius Slayton, who is currently sidelines rehabbing from an offseason core muscle surgery. When your top guys are sitting in the medical tent before the summer even really kicks off, your depth chart evaporates like a puddle in the sun. The Giants also lost Wan'Dale Robinson in free agency this offseason, so the urgency to just surround Jackson Dart with healthy pass catchers reached an absolute boiling point.
So the immediate Band-Aid solution they came up with on Monday was signing veteran Braxton Berrios to a one-year deal. And honestly, that makes perfect mathematical sense. Berrios is a former first-team All-Pro return specialist, right? He has an elite 24.9-yard career kickoff return average. He steps in and directly replaces Olszewski's vital special teams role.
Right. Berrios is the functional, totally necessary signing. They also worked out Juju Smith-Schuster, who obviously has deep familiarity with new offensive coordinator Matt Nagy from their time in Kansas City together. But let's be real for a second. Berrios and Juju weren't the names that broke the internet this week. The Giants desperately needed an emergency depth signing, but they ended up pivoting to a much more electric name on that Monday workout sheet.
Part 2, the prodigal son returns, reigniting the big blue flame.
We are talking about the player drafted 12th overall by New York way back in 2014. A guy who won Offensive Rookie of the Year, the guy who caught that legendary, gravity-defying, leaping, one-handed touchdown against Dallas that made him an absolute global sensation overnight. Odell Beckham Jr. coming back is honestly the kind of story that Hollywood writers would reject for being way too perfectly full circle.
Full circle, yes, for sure. But let's move along and see how this builds, because it's a circle that took a remarkably chaotic path to get back to the Meadowlands. Let's trace this winding journey on the timeline, because his path away from New York provides absolutely crucial context. So, he was traded to the Cleveland Browns in 2019 as part of a roster rebuild. Then he heads over to the LA Rams in 2021, where he literally scores the first points of the Super Bowl before suffering a brutal torn ACL in that very same game.
Right, and from there, he spends 2023 with the Baltimore Ravens, which, by the way, is a highly critical stop because he played under John Harbaugh, who is now the Giants head coach. Then a highly disappointing 2024 stint with the Miami Dolphins, which was unfortunately followed by a 6-game PED suspension and him sitting out the entire 2025 season. It has been a turbulent road, to say the very least. But wait, you gotta look at the history he left behind in New York. I have to interrupt the pessimism here to just marvel at these historic stats on the board. In just 59 games with the Giants between 2014 and 2018, he climbed to second in franchise history in receiving yards with 5,476. He's fourth all-time in receptions and fourth in touchdowns.
Okay, I can't argue with those numbers.
You really can't. His 92.8 receiving yards per game average is the absolute best in franchise history for anyone with over 50 games played. To put that into perspective, the next closest guy is Homer Jones way back in the 60s at 66.4 yards. That is a massive gap. Odell holds 3 of the top 5 single-season receiving yard records for the Giants. His peak in New York was just statistically undeniable. Part 3. Nostalgic hype versus reality. The harsh truth of Father Time. Yeah, those historic stats, those legendary one-handed catches, those 3 Pro Bowls, that was 2014 to 2016. In NFL years, that is practically ancient history. We cannot let nostalgic hype blind us to the harsh truth of Father Time. And this brilliantly illustrates what I mean, the extreme visual whiplash between his legendary peak and his grim recent output. The player who stepped onto the practice field this week is not the player who left in 2018. At his peak, Odell tied an NFL record for the fewest games needed to reach 4,000 career receiving yards. He had over 1,300 yards in each of his first 3 seasons.
I know. The physical baseline is the giant question mark hanging over this entire reunion.
Precisely. Now compare that to recent OBJ. In 2024 with Miami, he played 9 games, he had exactly 9 catches for 55 yards and 0 touchdowns. He hasn't caught a touchdown pass since December of 2023. He then sat out the entirety of 2025. We are talking about an enormous glaring gap in production.
Part 4. The Risk and the Reward. A calculated gamble for East Rutherford.
Look, I hear your stats, and yeah, they are pretty grim. But context is literally everything here. Despite the declining numbers, the specific context of this deal, the mountain of injuries, the front office strategy, the current coaching staff, makes this a highly calculated and worthwhile gamble for East Rutherford.
A gamble implies you could lose something. I'm just trying to figure out what the Giants actually expect to win here with a player whose best days are objectively a full decade behind him. Let me just hammer this number on the screen home to ground our expectations firmly in reality. 33. Odell Beckham Jr. is 33 years old, and he turns 34 this November. He hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since his first year with the Browns back in 2019. Knee issues, including 2 major ACL tears, have completely derailed the back half of his career. Relying on a 33-year-old coming off a year-long couch stint is incredibly precarious.
And beyond just his physical age, there's the inherent risk of off-field drama. We all know Odell's personality was never exactly known for being laid back and relaxed. Adam Schultz from the Sporting News pointed this out perfectly in this quote. If Odell is brought in strictly as a situational receiver or an emergency depth piece, and he feels he's healthy, is he really going to accept limited targets? If he gets frustrated watching a young guy like Malik Neighbors get all the looks, it might not take long for him to express that publicly and create a totally unnecessary distraction. So, the crucial point is the money. You talk about all this risk, but financially speaking, this is the ultimate low-risk move. The Giants are reportedly getting him on a 1-year, veteran minimum contract with some incentives attached. At bottom-of-the-barrel prices, the financial hazard of this acquisition is practically non-existent. Think about it. If he complains, or if his knees give out, they just cut him. It costs them basically nothing against the salary cap. Okay, I will admit, from a pure salary cap perspective, the risk-to-reward ratio is a whole lot easier to swallow on a veteran minimum deal. Exactly, and it's not just about the money, it's about the locker room fit. I want to passionately highlight this crucial connection with head coach John Harbaugh. They spent the 2023 season together in Baltimore. Harbaugh explicitly said Odell is in a really great place with his humility right now. He wants to be part of a team, and most importantly, he wants to mentor. Just imagine the massive upside of a humbled, experienced Odell Beckham Jr. mentoring sophomore quarterback Jackson Dart, or passing down route-running nuances to Malik Neighbors. That mentorship alone is totally worth the veteran minimum contract.
Part 5. Expectations for version 2.0. What constitutes success in 2026?
Mentorship is great, sure, but they also need him to catch footballs because everyone else is practically in the hospital right now. So what does actual, tangible success look like for this version 2.0 receiver on a desperately injured roster? We obviously can't judge him against his 2014 stats, so what is the new benchmark for a successful 2026 campaign? Dan Duggan from The Athletic framed this with a really sobering reality check. Beckham simply cannot be expected to replace the production of a fully healthy Malik Neighbors or Darius Slayton. He is strictly an emergency safety blanket if those guys take longer to recover from their knee and core surgeries. Odell just needs to be a reliable set of hands to stabilize the passing attack for Jackson Dart. That's the job now. Possession receiver, safety valve, not a primary weapon.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how surprisingly low the bar actually is for this to be considered a massive win. Honestly, if he just gives them 300-plus yards and a couple of touchdowns this season, analysts are calling that a huge net positive. But look at the history. Odell only needs a few flashes of his old brilliance to permanently rewrite the Giants' record books. Check this out. He needs just 5 receptions to tie Joe Morrison for 3rd all-time in franchise history, and he needs just 5 touchdowns to pass Kyle Rote for 2nd all-time. He is literally on the precipice of cementing his legacy forever, and doing that in front of the MetLife crowd, that would just be incredible.
It would be incredible, no doubt, but it all comes down to whether those knees actually hold up. So we're leaving you with this big question. Is this signing a stroke of low-risk, veteran minimum genius by a front office exploiting a desperate situation, or is this just a purely nostalgic, emotional Band-Aid for a franchise that is really struggling to find its footing? I honestly think it's a little bit of both, but I am definitely leaning towards genius on this one. The emotional homecoming factor is very real, but that zero-risk contract makes it brilliant in my eyes. We want to hear from you, though. Let us know how you weigh the true value of Odell's return to Big Blue. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will catch you next time.